Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced again. And again, if you enjoy these learning Python videos, please do become a supporter by going to donate.alexmerced.com. Especially if you become a monthly supporter, it really helps me to know how much time I can budget to creating more and more videos. And so basically, just putting out information and teaching people, putting it out there for people to really be able to learn and educate themselves with. So please do consider doing that, or even making a one-time donation, or taking advantage of one of the affiliate deals over there at donate.alexmerced.com. So what I want to do today is want to learn a little bit about working with user input and casting. So first what I'm going to do is work with user input. So let me just show you this example code. Now what this example code does is it's going to ask for input from the user and then display its type, meaning it'll tell me, is it an integer, is it a string, what is it? So the way I have the code here, we're going to have a variable called user response. Now inside that variable is going to be the result of input from the user. Okay, so this is how I ask for input. Now after that input, the result of this input here is put into this variable. I want to know what kind of variable is it. So I'm going to print, meaning I'm going to print onto the screen, and what am I printing? The result of type. Type basically then just goes back and collects what type of variable it is. What the type of variable that user response is. Now let's see if this all works. Run module. Okay, save it. Let's see. Type user response. And the reason why I'm able to do this, so even though we didn't get the result that we wanted, if it had run the code, which it seems like it did, I'm not seeing any errors, that means it probably at least still generated the variable user response. So I can try to do that. So I can still run the command on the command line and see I can still get what I would have wanted printed, class string. So basically, which is what I was trying to get at. User response is string of the class string. But I realized why it didn't run, because I forgot to give it input. So we're going to run it again. So we're going to run the module. I actually have to give it input. That's right. So let's see here. Let's say ff class string. Now let's run it one more time. Let's see what happens if I write a number down. So if I were to make it 55 instead of ff, it's still a string. And this is kind of the point I want to make. Basically, whatever you type in from input, it's going to return a string. And that's important, because what if I wanted to do this? Okay, so basically, again, it's going to ask me for user input, then suppose to print the type, which it did. But what if I wanted to afterwards do print 5 plus user response? Print 5 plus the whatever you put in there. Like, let's say I put in 55, I don't want to do 5 plus 55. Here is the problem. So, on the module, see if it catches the problem early or not. Okay, so it's going to ask me to put in the input 55. But the problem is, even though it prints, so see, it gets to the point where it prints the type of variable that it is. So I said, hey, I'm going to give you the number 55. And it told me, hey, you know what? That 55 is not a number. It's not an integer. It's a string. It's treated like a sequence of letters. So in that case, when it tries to give me, when I say, hey, add 5 to 55, it's like, what are you trying to tell me to do? 5 is an integer, it's a number, and you want me to add it to a string? I'm confused. So it gives me this error. So how do I fix that? Okay, what I have to do is I have to take user response and turn it into an integer. And there's different ways I can do it. I can do it over here by calling forth the command int, meaning whatever is in here, make it an integer. So if I do that, whatever the result of the input is will be turned into an integer. Okay? and then this all should work just fine. So let's give that a shot. Okay, so let's put in 55 again, and see, it printed, so it took 55, and see now it's printing out an int type, so I know it's an int type, and be able to add it to 5, so we get 60. Now, is that the only way I could do it? And this is an important point because in programming, there's many ways to do things. The question is sort of what's the best way to do it, and also what's the most efficient way to do it, where it's more obvious. So if there's no situation where I don't need this variable to be a string, then this is the smartest place to put it. But if I might use it as a string in some places, and then only use it as an integer in certain places, I may just want to do it over here. Okay, so let's see here. And let's just double check to see if this works. So, okay, once again, change that back to what it was. And if I go back over here, I'll do once again int. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, it's 5 plus an integer version of this variable. So in that case, the variable user response will continue to be a string, but I'm only really turning it into an integer for the purposes of turning it into 5. So basically, just to make sure that to make this clear, I'm going to reprint the type. So actually, I can just copy and paste this code. I'll just do that. That way you can see, even though it will add it together, I have not changed the fundamental variable type, which, again, in certain situations, may be what I want. Run, save. Okay, so if I give it 55, there we go. So you see, in this case, when I gave it to 55, it didn't turn it into an integer right away. It's still a string. But it did turn it into an integer for the purposes of adding it to 5, but it didn't change the type of the actual variable itself. So the variable user response was still a string, even though it turned it into an integer for that moment. So when I change the type of a variable, when I type in int and put a variable inside of it, that's called casting. And I can do that with any kind of variable. I can say, hey, if I did the opposite, hey, so for example, let's go back to our original. So let me take this out here. And then I go back over here and I cast that as an integer. So basically I'm taking the result of input, I'm casting it as an integer. That's what that function does, that int function. Okay, anything inside the parentheses gets turned into that. Okay, and you have to have the parentheses after input. Okay. Now then, it's going to print the user response, print the type of that variable. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another line of code where I'm going to cast that user response back into a string. So string for string, user response. And then we'll print the type once again, just to show you that I turned it back into a string. So let's save it, and then we'll run the module. Okay, so scroll down. Put 55 again. It's out of the way. See it here. So you can see I put in 55, but it did not cast it as a string. So let's take a look at my code, see what I did. So here's where I did wrong. All I did was cast it, but I didn't assign it to the variable. Remember, you always have to assign it. So what I need to do is put user response equals string user response. So just running, again, just doing the actual casting function doesn't change the variable. You actually still have to assign it to the variable. Say the result of this is in this cubby hole. So let's save and run the module. Okay, we'll wait to the bottom so we put in our number, 55. and this time it worked. So again, first I gave the number 55. It told me, hey, 55 was casted as an int. Remember, I cast it as an int right over here. As I said, whatever the result of the input is, we're going to make it an integer. So it's going to print its type as integer. It added it to 55, the 5, gave me 60. But then I casted it again as a string, and there it is, it's a string again. So I can use the print and input functions. I can use the print function again to print stuff out. I can use the input function to collect input from the user, but I can change the type of variable something is by using casting either through int, str for string, and then if I wanted to make a float number, it would be float. Same idea. Okay. And again, why would you want to do this? Is because sometimes you're going to want to use some information, sometimes as a string, sometimes as a number. So for example, someone told me that their height is 5 feet. There are going to be certain times where I just want to print 5 feet as part of a sentence. So I'm going to need to cast it as a string for that purpose. But there's going to be other times I may want to add their height, or maybe use their height in some sort of calculation, so I need to cast it as an integer. So you can take that same information you may have asked from the user through input and be able to use it in different situations as needed. And that's why this is kind of important. You need to be able to make sure you treat your data in the right type, in the right way, and also figure out what's the most efficient way of using it. So again, the example up here is where I casted it up here because maybe I plan on just using it as an integer going forward. But I might be able to just cast it when needed if I plan on using it multiple times in multiple different ways. So you always think, what is the purpose of what you're doing, and what is going to result in the least amount of code in the long run, because you want efficient code because it runs faster, and that matters. Especially very large programs that are doing a lot of things, you want to do it as little code as possible so that way it runs as fast as possible. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great one. Enjoy.